I'd like to welcome you to our town council meeting of March 6th. And Rebecca, will you kindly take the roll?
Councilmember Andrews.
Present.
Councilmember Bailey. Councilmember Ravazio.
Here.
Vice Mayor First.
Here.
Mayor Condon.
Here. And if you'll all please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, and before we continue, I just wanted to mention, oh, there, better? Okay. I, that's our man in the closet. And,
Every town needs one.
yeah. Anyways, I wanted to report from our last council meeting. In our closed session, we just gave direction to the staff, and today, from our closed session, I have nothing to report. So, we have nothing to report there. And tonight, before we start our presentation, we have open time for public comment. And anyone that has anything to comment about that is not on tonight's agenda, you're welcome to come up to the podium and you'll have 3 minutes. Is there anybody here? Ms. Metcalf.
I've been looking at the large projects that we have coming up, and I think of the debacle, shall we say, of Wind Cup. And I have a suggestion to make, which has been done in other localities, that when we have major projects such as RH, the one at Scandinavian Designs, etc., we can encourage, if not insist, that local contractors are used. And when I say local, I'm talking like the 9 Bay Area counties. They don't have to be from Marin. But when you have people who are local, they know the consequences of messing up the job. If you notice Wind Cup, I think they were from Las Vegas. When they started the Buck Center many years ago, they brought in people from Texas and had to have a lot of the work redone. And this is an ongoing problem. And I think after what happened with Wind Cup, we should really take a look on major projects, insisting there's certainly enough contractors within the 9 Bay Area counties that contractors and subs could be found.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to make a public comment? Okay, seeing none, I'll close it to public comment, and then we will go on to our presentation. And tonight is really going to not only be interesting, but I know that speaking on behalf of the council, you certainly have our ongoing support. And this is for the Coalition Connection, and it's an update to the council provided by Linda Henn, who is the project coordinator, and to Kelsey Fernandez, assistant coordinator. And the Coalition Connection, for those of you who don't know about it, it's a collaborative comprised of the Twin Cities Coalition for Healthy Youth, of which our fellow council member Bob Ravazio is very active in, and the Ross Valley Healthy Community Collaborative. So if you ladies would like to start, we're ready.
Thank you, Carla. And thank you for inviting Kelsey and I to talk this evening. The Coalition Connection, as Carla said, is a combination of the 2 area coalitions, and they became the Coalition Connection. They started about 7 years ago when Lori Dubin brought the issue of excessive underage substance use to Todd Cusimano. And then shortly after that, Carla became aware of a grant, and Todd and Larry Chu worked on the grant and received the grant it was a state grant. And Bob Ravazio and Larry Chu led the coalition along with Lori Dubin and other Redwood parents and community partners, with CMPA being the Central Marin Police Authority being the fiscal agent. The Twin Cities for Healthy Use was formed with 12 sectors of the community working on a strategic plan and initiatives around retail and social access. Lori created Be the Influence, which is a program geared towards changing parent norms around permissive parenting. And the coalition worked on action plans aimed at reducing access in homes and through parent education events, communication through the schools, and working with CMPA to increase enforcing the social host ordinance, as well as publicizing the citations. And about 4 years ago, we joined forces with, 4 years ago, actually, Ross Valley Healthy Community Collaborative was started and operated under a similar premise, and we would partner on some projects, and they were led by Liz Seabury, David Finan, John Walsh, and Renee Goddard. And they assembled a passionate group of community members interested in tackling a variety of youth issues. This dedicated group put on parent education and community events, created a branding campaign, and worked tirelessly at getting the word out that teens needed our help. The two coalitions worked together on several projects and decided we should join forces. We applied for a drug-free communities grant, which is a federal grant, and we received and branded the joint coalition as the Coalition Connection. So our partnership with CMPA, Corte Madera, and the towns we serve has been strong. Am I supposed to be? Oh, you got it. Okay, sorry. I didn't know if I'm supposed to. I'm not good at that, talking and advancing the slide. This collaborative effort has enabled us to do so much more, and the support services received from the town and CMPA has allowed us to receive substantial funding through the county and federal government. Our relationship with CMPA involves ABC work, school resource officer, and which informs us on the life at the high school as it relates to teens and substance use and contributing factors. Our relationship with the town of Corte Madera is critical as we partner with the Corte Madera Rec Center on the age-friendly intergenerational center, which is very exciting, and the schools. And Bob Ravazio has been the co-chair for the past 7 years and continues to guide the coalition. We have a good relationship with the council members as we work together to increase the health and safety of youth and engage in dialogue and share information. In September, we received the DFC grant after applying for the grant 3 times. This grant was awarded to only 5 coalitions in California and 70 throughout the country, so it was a big deal to get this. And when we first got it, I said, I can't believe we got it. And then I looked at the body of work that we said we would do, and I understood. And we have been ambitiously and we've been working very hard ever since we got this grant. It has increased our resources, and we have assembled a team of 12 sectors that are vital to making our work more sustainable. This is Drug-Free Communities has identified the 12 sectors that that research has shown works to get our work into the community. And it's parents, business, media, schools, youth-serving organizations, law enforcement, civic organizations, religious, healthcare, government, substance abuse, and most importantly, youth. You can't solve a youth issue without youth at the table. And this slide is the 12 sector representatives that we have, and we've been able to get some really robust, and I always call it, we have intellectual horsepower at the table. And yesterday we actually had about 8 youth at the table, and they were very engaged and very involved, and they were great. I feel very lucky about the coalition we formed. So the next slide shows across the country the data for adult use, and it's hard to see because it's really small and the colors are, but Marin County has about a 74% prevalence rate. And this compares to the United States, and a California average of 56. So what this says is our adults like to drink. Now this shows the youth use. And on the far left, you have California, and then in the middle, Marin data. And this is based on the California Healthy Kids Survey data. And then on the far right, the TAM Union. And you can see we have a trend here where by from California to TAM Union, you have more than a 50% increase in use. There's something going on in Marin County that's unique. We have a high use. And this is marijuana use, and it follows the same trend. And when we look at, we don't have a slide for it, but we look at the total number of 11th graders that have ever used in their lifetime, the number is 75%. Where am I? One second. And so with the marijuana, I just want to point out, with legalization, we anticipate this to go up because the perception of harm is extremely low for marijuana already for youth, and once it's legalized, it is anticipated to go even lower. And when there's access, they already had easy access, and it's going to be easier. So this has been a main objective of the coalition, is working on decreasing the access and decreasing the normalization of it. So we've been doing a lot of work around the ordinances in the town. In fact, tomorrow night we'll be at Fairfax to hear what they're going to do about it, and that should be very interesting. So the DFC grant has two main goals. They want us to establish and strengthen collaboration among communities and reduce substance use among youth. It sounds pretty simple, doesn't it? But it's really not. And our goal is to decrease 11th grade alcohol and marijuana use by 5% by 2023 and decrease prescription drug misuse by 10%. So some of the strategies, we try to work on what they call environmental strategies. We have individual strategies and environmental. Individual works on like education, skills, based on an individual basis, where environmental strategies focus on changing the environment on which our youth operate. So we integrate both individual and environmental strategies. In environmental strategies that we work on are changing norms through programs like Be the Influence, and another one you'll hear soon from Kelsey, and policies, and then changing the physical environment in which youth operate. The social host ordinance, which you've heard a lot about from me in the past few months, earlier last year, Marin County revised the language in social host ordinance to include marijuana and controlled substances, and also adding party buses and other rental facilities to private property, as well as a restorative justice component for youth. So far, Novato, Fairfax, Tiburon, Belvedere, and Mill Valley have adopted the new language, and we're hoping that we'll get a uniform social host ordinance in place for the whole county. I know that Central Marin Police with Larkspur, Corte Madera, and San Anselmo are looking at changing the language, and I appreciate your efforts around this. These changes are important to promote the social host ordinance, create the uniformity, and serve as a diversion for underage substance use. So we can protect our youth while raising the awareness of the harm of marijuana to youth. We hope Corte Madera will join this effort. Now it's Kelsey.
Okay, hello. So Raising the Bar, actually, can we pass out these flyers for the Raising the Bar program? This is one of our main initiatives that we're working on this year. It started last year in Ross Valley, where we went to these participating organizations that you see, West Marin Little League, San Anselmo Baseball Association, Ross Valley Breakers, and the Sleepy Hollow Swim Team, and presented to their board and showed them the data from our community in terms of the use of both youth and adults in our community. And they adopted this program where they agreed to serve only non-alcoholic beverages at team parties and end-of-year celebrations. And this is something that we are rolling out throughout our coalition this year, throughout the other communities in Twin Cities. Also, it's being rolled out through the county and other coalitions in Marin, along with a county-funded media campaign and a website. Linda showed you on the back, there's actually the top graph you saw, which shows the use, I need mine, which shows the use. I think it's the alcohol use in Marin, looking at, California and Marin and Tam Union High School District. And then the bottom is actually a study that was done by students at Redwood High School, Redwood Night Live, where it shows the correlation between students reporting having seen their parents intoxicated, and then how that correlates with their 30-day use. And they did find a strong correlation with that. So it is something that we know from various studies that there is a correlation between parent modeling and youth consumption. Oops, wrong way. So parent education events, that's something we do 2 main parent education events every year. This past fall, the main one that we did is marijuana is legal, now what? And we had the Marin County Public Health Officer, we had a captain from CMPA, addiction specialist, and the director of the YMCA Youth Court on our panel. And basically, it was just a very informative evening, answering questions about what does this mean now that marijuana is legal in Marin, and what does that mean to youth? I like using what Matt Willis said when people asked if he's for or against marijuana, and he said neither. What we're not for marijuana for youth because we know it can be harmful, but there's still so much that we don't know. So we're trying to tackle it from that angle and do what we can, both with environmental prevention in terms of policy, like Linda mentioned, going and talking to the town councils. Tomorrow night we're talking to Fairfax. We're gonna stand up and speak our 3 minutes at least, and just try to communicate the information that we know around the harms. And we always do post-event surveys and to find out if the information was helpful, what we can do different, and if it actually affects the way that parents behave. And parent support is another component of what we work on. Like Linda mentioned, again, is the Be the Influence program that was started by Lori Dubin. And this year we are rolling it out to middle schools. Our target audience really is, when we look at who we're trying to reach, it's primarily we're looking at mostly 6th through 10th grade. And so we're trying to reach those parents. And we're also seeing that, especially with the vaping, that there's some of the usage is starting earlier, and we want to get the younger parents on board sooner. Another really excellent parent support program is Redwood Parents Connect, was co-founded by Vicki Van and Deb Loon at Redwood High School. And that's a program that we're now this year rolling out at Drake High School as well. And youth involvement. One of the biggest additions we're making to the coalitions this year is involving youth more than we have in the past. Youth input has always been very important to our work. But this year we are kind of stepping it up a notch. We attended a youth adult partnership training this January to really identify some strategies to bring the youth more into the loop in terms of leading campaigns and being decision makers. In February 2018, we had a well-known speaker in the Bay Area around marijuana, Ralph Cantor, and also Don Carney, work with the peer resources at 3 of the high schools. And then they're going to then do a peer-to-peer campaign and do a school-wide campaign around marijuana education. Also, actually, today was the first focus group that we did at Drake High School. We are also going to be doing focus groups at Redwood High School, where we're working with 4 different groups right now. It's the AVID, Peer Resources, a Social Issues class, and ASB. And just kind of trying to understand their perceptions, dig a little bit deeper into the data that we see with the California Healthy Kids Survey, so it can inform our messaging and our work. Don Carney's helping us develop the Youth Advisory Council within the coalition connection, and like Linda mentioned, it was great. We had several youth around the table yesterday at our monthly coalition meeting, and it's amazing how much they inform our work in terms of really being able to inform us what's going on from their perspective. And we also are a partner with Redwood Night Live. And they did have the event last month that there was, gosh, I think there was about 12 youth leaders that were then with the freshman parents and just answering questions about how to communicate with your teen, what's going on with youth, with use, what to look for, and that type of thing. These two programs are just in the initial stages. We have a 5-year grant, and so we're like, okay, we're about 5 months into our 5 years, so we can take our time a little bit. But with the physician partnership program at this point, we're just evaluating what's out there right now. You know, Linda has been working with Matt Willis and our physician representative for the coalition, and just polling physicians and trying to find out what screening tools they use, what their protocol is. There doesn't seem like as of now there is something standardized that they're using, and so that's something that we want to look at and see if there's a way that we can help roll something like that out. And the merchant partnership program as well. We just, our third staff member who couldn't be here tonight, who has only been in the job for about a month, is working on this. She also works with Smoke Free Marin. And, you know, the one thing, you know, that she had down that I should mention is that we support the tobacco retail license law. And so what that is it's a law that is it requires retailers to have a license to sell tobacco products. So currently, I believe in Corte Madera, you can have a license to sell tobacco products, but it won't be revoked if you sell to minors. There'll just be fines. The tobacco retail license law actually has a license that will be revoked if you sell to minors. So it's a different consequence for selling to minors. Please don't ask me any questions about that. And the next one is marketing, media, and community outreach. So much of our work is really just kind of trying to get the word out and to educate the public. And I've been doing that a little bit on nextdoor.com. I don't recommend it at all to anybody to use that platform. But we distributed 2,700 community of concern booklets to the freshman parents in Tam Union High School District, and also sent out some information to all the 6th grade parents at Hall Middle School. We've been in the press. Linda's been in the press, given a few interviews, been on TV, and we're really just kind of trying to get the message out here that we are a coalition that is really focused on just creating a healthy and safe community for youth, with our website that has resources for parents, and our Facebook presence. We try to participate in community events, and then also, as I mentioned, with our parent modeling campaign that the county is going to be funding these ads in the Marin IJ and Marinscope, on the bus shelters, and Pandora and Facebook online. And we cannot do this alone. And I don't know if you used your wheel with the spoke analogy, but we really do see it as like we're this hub, but there's so much that we do that we just are utilizing what other people out there, communities, organizations are doing already in keeping our youth healthy. Really, you know, the relationship that we have with wellness has just been amazing, and they've allowed, you know, just kind of this inroads to work with youth in the schools, which has been amazing. And there's so many of our community partners, not the least of which is Central Marin Police Authority, who's our fiscal agent, and we could not do this work without them. So thank you, Corte Madera. The town of Corte Madera obviously has been a huge supporter of the work from the very beginning, especially with Bob Ravazio, who has been on the board, and has just been able to inform our work and support our work for all these years, and we look forward to at least 5 more. Thank you.
Oh, Kelsey, thank you very much. And Linda, thank you so much. No one can even estimate how much work these ladies put into this. That's really having such a tremendous benefit on families all over Marin. And Todd, is there some way we can be real proactive in updating our ordinance so that it is compatible with San Anselmo and Larkspur supporting the social host ordinance?
Yes, absolutely, and I've encouraged the San Anselmo manager to start the process and work their way towards us. So they'll start and we'll close it.
Okay, well, keep
you
your
got it.
thumbs on them, okay? Oh, great. Thank you so much. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the consent calendar. This is the time when you can look over the consent calendar. There are items that have been grouped together which are either routine or have been discussed previously and do not require further discussion. They'll be approved by a single motion. Any member of the council, staff, or the public may request removal of an item for discussion. And then if anything is removed, then I will figure out when we should talk about it. So is there anyone here that wants to pull anything? Otherwise, I'll ask for a motion.
I'll move to approve 4.1.1 through 4.1.8.
Second?
Councilmember Andrews.
Yes.
Councilmember Bailey. Councilmember Ravazio.
Yes.
Vice Mayor First.
Yes.
Mayor Condon.
Yes. And then we'll move on to the sanitary district. There are no items this evening. So on to our public hearing. We're going to have a public hearing on an appeal, and this is of a design review application, and it is for a new 4,360 square foot, two-level, single-family dwelling at 8 Westward. This is an application that had been approved by the Planning Commission and has been appealed. Now, I'm just going to ask my fellow council members if anybody had gone to see the site.
Yes, I visited the site. I saw 8 Westward from the street, and I visited 10 Westward and went in the backyard and viewed the story poles at 8 Westward from the viewpoint of 10 Westward.
Thank you. Jim?
I visited the site last weekend, talked with the owner of 10 Westwood, viewed from his deck and backyard. I also tromped around the yard of, 8 Westwood, and, basically walked the site there, so.
And I walked the site at 8 Westward, and I visited 10 Westward as well. I spoke with the owner via phone, and with their permission, I accessed the backyard and the back patio and was able to view the story poles from the back patio.
Okay, thank you. And I observed the site of 8 Westward, and then I did go and visit the site at 10 Westward, specifically the backyard and the back patio. Now, Doug, are you presenting or, okay. Our staff member, Doug Bush.
Yep.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Will you please give us a staff report on this?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
So I guess I just start by saying that there's quite an extensive amount of information in the packet. So I'm just going to try to provide sort of a brief overview. We provided a staff report that sort of goes over the history of it briefly. So I'll try not to copy too much of that and leave room for questions. But I just wanted to provide some context, just some basic background on it for everyone's benefit tonight. So we're looking at 8 Westward Drive, which is located here on the vicinity map, just off of Paradise Drive. just to describe some of the site characteristics. You've all had a chance to go out there. But what we have is sort of a street, Westwood Drive, which climbs up off of Paradise Drive. Each house is sort of on a terraced building pad. Most of the houses, you know, they were sort of oriented toward the street. Most of the windows are facing the street. These are, I believe many of these homes were built in the early 60s. The subject property, the applicants applied to demolish a majority of the existing home and construct a new residence in its place. I believe that may have been as early as March of last year. There were several meetings, 4 meetings before the Planning Commission, before the project was appealed, which is why we're here tonight to discuss that. So the appellant's property, as shown here, is 10 Westward, which is just to the south, this kind of southeast there, and situated just above the subject property. Just to kind of provide a top-down view to show the footprint of the existing structure, I've tried to use some bold lines here to just show the outline of the property boundaries is the bold line surrounding the whole frame there. And then just in from that, the dashed line represents the setbacks. A site of this size has setbacks on the sides that are 6 feet, 20 feet on the front, and 25 feet from the rear. So that creates sort of the buildable, the potentially buildable area in the center there. And the existing footprint of this 2-story house is represented there with the bold line. The proposed structure would largely mimic that while also expanding into the rear yard as well. The blue line here sort of represents the footprint of the upper floor, and we'll go into some kind of background about how it got into its current form through several iterations through the Planning Commission. Here is the existing elevations as you would see it today. It is a 2-story home. It's largely original. I believe there's a sunroom at the rear that was added at a later date. And it's almost 25 feet tall. So the proposed structure is shown here. This is what was approved by the Planning Commission by unanimous vote February of this year. As you can see, they're using articulation on multiple elevations here. The front elevation is on the top of the east elevation, and then the back of the house is seen on the west elevation there. Really a significant amount of articulation, using a low sloped roof peak to try to limit the height of it. And as you look on the right side of that east elevation there, trying to step down with the slope in compliance with some of the policies of the general plan, which call for the articulation and the massing of the home to mimic the topography of the slope. This is kind of a rendering of one of the, when it was first submitted to the town, showing the original design. And this design raised some issues for both staff and the Planning Commission at that time concerning massing, kind of overall height. There was some, concern over the height of that element on the right as it related to that downslope property, because these properties do, sit one above the next. So they came back with some revisions. There was also issues at that time concerning findings relating to view impacts and impacts on neighboring properties. So through several design iterations coming back to the Planning Commission, some significant changes were made, both in terms of just the overall appearance and design, as well as significantly minimizing impacts to neighboring properties. So this is the current rendering of the proposed design. As you can see, a significant amount of massing was eliminated on the right side there. As we saw in the kind of that footprint diagram or the site plan, that massing that was previously on the right side there was instead extended as a lower floor element into the rear yard, where it wouldn't create that, the prior sort of looming appearance over that lower neighbor. And again, you can see a significant amount of articulation, sort of asymmetrical window placement, and a very, very modern design, as well as a significant landscaping plan, which is included in the plan sets that were provided to you with your packet. Again, just looking at the footprint, You can see a couple things here. One is how I mentioned that the lower floor extends into the rear yard, obviously further than it does in the existing footprint. And that was one of the changes with the desire to maintain a particular amount of floor space while doing so in a way that would not create issue with massing and would not create an impact on adjacent properties. So that's why you kind of have that addition to the rear yard. And again, there's the setbacks showing that even as it extends, it meets all the setbacks, it meets floor area, height, meets all the standards of the zoning ordinance. Just to provide some context here, again, showing the condition on the street. There remained view issues, concerns about design review finding 3 relating to impacts to adjacent neighbors. This was the story poles at a prior iteration showing blockage of the bay view there. As you all saw on your site visit, this view is not one that can be seen from a majority of the yard. This is seen when standing on the raised deck at 10 Westward. Also the date from which the commission hearing where this was considered and this was shown. This was from January of this year. That furthest story pole was moved eastward, and with the direction of the Planning Commission to relocate that to the point of the chimney. Here you see contractor standing with the story pole to represent that line of sight. Just of note, that story pole that's furthest to the west there that was not moved, the actual wall is moved to where the arrow is pointing, but the original story pole was kept there for reference. So that's what you may have seen on a site visit. So ultimately, the Planning Commission did approve this project unanimously in February after four hearings, as I mentioned. All the findings have been made, obviously an attachment with the Planning Commission resolution for approval was included, as well as a draft resolution for approval. There's several options available to you tonight to deny the appeal, which would approve the project, to modify the Planning Commission's action by changing the conditions of approval and associated findings, or to approve the appeal, which would thereby overturn the Planning Commission's decision, or by remanding the action back to the Planning Commission with direction for further review. That concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have on the
Thanks,
project.
Doug. Any questions to staff? Jim?
What happened to the retaining walls?
The retaining walls specifically,
Yes, when I walked around 8, it looks like the remaining walls were not there. And
yes, so
I'm concerned about hills coming down.
yes, so retaining walls were removed. They were removed without permits. The building department notified the applicants. They submitted building permits for installing retaining walls, and those permits were issued, and the applicants have moved forward with remedying that issue. So they're in the process of constructing those retaining walls, and that's been approved.
Okay. What was the timeline of the walls being put out and them drilling the holes to reinstall the retaining?
I don't have that detail for you.
Okay.
Doug, I'm assuming, I'm looking through here, but I'm assuming that there was a geology report for that hill.
All the information that was required by the building department was provided. All that information must be, there's particular information that has to be provided before a building permit can be issued, and all those standards were met. And so that the building permits were issued.
Okay.
Yeah, which includes significant engineering, and, they have to show through.
That's for the retaining wall.
Yeah,
Yes.
on that back slope. Okay, thank you. Any other questions to staff? Okay, then we will start with the presentations. This is the public portion of the hearing. And first, we will hear from the appellant. And the appellant will have 10 minutes to speak. Before you begin, I just want to make a statement that I am acquainted with the applicant. We both serve on the Marin Local Agency Formation Commission. And, but I wanted to also state that I feel that I can make a completely fair decision, and I don't have any sort of a financial interest in this at all.
See, you know the applicant or the appellant?
The applicant.
Okay.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Okay, Mr. Sherwood.
Thank you. Is there a clock somewhere? No.
Usually I have it on the screen, but if you're doing the screen, I'm going to start it when you tell me to start.
And you will have 10 minutes.
Understood. Thank you very much. I can answer your question about the timing of the removal of the retaining walls. It occurred before the initial application was submitted back in August, July of last year. And the work that started the retaining walls occurred, the reinstallation of the retaining walls occurred roughly the time of the Planning Commission approval of the project. So 8-9 months, something like that. I'm Tom Sherwood. My wife and I live at 10 Westward Drive in Corte Madera. We've lived there since 1984 and have enjoyed our time here and the views that we've had from the rear of the property. As you've all seen, we've done a fair amount of work in the backyard that has become a focal point of our property. The first, there are two issues that are really the crux of the appeal. One of them is frankly a more of a public policy issue, less of a significant to our particular situation, other than in the way it intersects with the second issue, which we'll talk about before, which is the general plan's requirement that the project be in scale and harmonious with existing and future development adjacent to the site and in the vicinity. And that simply is not the case here. As you'll see, the existing neighborhood condition, this is a Google Maps aerial view. You'll see the view to the bay is off to the upper right-hand corner. Westward curves so that you have an angled view off into the bay. The houses are offset a fair amount to articulate the view for each of the houses to maximize what each house or lot can see in terms of the bay and the hills across. The houses in this neighborhood are while it is true they are second story, they are very small second story houses. The second stories almost uniformly exist over a fairly small portion of the property, delineated here in the boxes, usually over a garage, sometimes over the main living area, but in all instances it's a fairly small portion of the overall floor area coverage of the houses. Here's another view just further back to get a better sense of some of the other houses in the neighborhood that contain the same pattern of development. This is the existing condition of the house, currently 2,700 square feet, a lot coverage ratio of 0.17. This is the same house. You'll notice, interestingly, the windows here on this facade. These windows have been in existence for a long time to provide views to the bay of the prior owner of that house. I'll mention in a moment why that's significant. Some of the rest of the houses, just in the immediate vicinity, I'm not going to go through every single house, but this is the corner a lot across the street with a floor area coverage ratio of about 0.2, 2,050 square feet. 2 Westward Drive across. This is the one house that's the outlier in all of the subdivision. It was remodeled a few years back, and it was in fact redesigned, I believe at the request of the Planning Commission or the City Council, I don't recall which, in order to pull it back and provide an uninterrupted view from the houses, from the windows at then 6 Westward Drive. This house primarily, although it has a westward address, the bulk of it is along Paradise Drive and is not seen from anywhere in the neighborhood. Other houses, 2,500 square feet directly across the street from the subject property. One up from that, 2,000 square feet. And by the way, these are estimates. I had the living areas. I didn't have the garage area, so I just added the largest garage I could find, 480 square feet, which is my garage, and came up with the totals. They may be, in fact, smaller than these numbers. Our house is 2,610 square feet and an FAR about 22%. That includes a substantial remodel we made a few years back by expanding the kitchen by about 5 feet for about a total of 50 square feet of addition. Here, a comparison of the lot sizes and the FARs the lot sizes. As you can see, going down the table here, these are the dwelling square footages, the garages that I mentioned, total square footages, and this is the difference between the approved project and the existing square footage of these houses. So, for example, 8 Westward is going to be 2,300 square feet, bigger than 1 Westward at 113% of that size, so more than double. Most of the houses are in the 80 or 75, 80% increase, so this is a big, 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 big house. Hello. Oh, wrong one. Sorry about that. Then moving on to the second finding that intersects with the first and is a private issue, and that's the project will not significantly and adversely affect the views, sunlight, or privacy of nearby residences. And I have to say that I don't know how one can find that the proposed project does not significantly and adversely affect the views from our property. What you're looking at here is the original proposal that was submitted without consultation or any attempt to work with us. Pardon the kindergarten artwork, but here is what that would have looked like had it been approved by the town. And appropriately, the Planning Commission rejected it as being far out of bounds for what should have been approved. As was noted before, the final approval, you'll see the red line is the actual boundary of the property of the wall. That'll be what's blocked by our view that's blocked. This is actually not taken from the deck. This is taken from to the right of the deck at eye level. More accurately, let me say my eye level, which is not very high off the ground, certainly not Chris's eye level. So it's fairly significant from, I'm sorry, the first one was from the deck. This is from standing on the property line. And as I mentioned, we intend to remove the fence, which has just been a safety fence for a few years. This is the extension, the approximate location of the wall of the old house, to give you some idea of how much forward towards into the backyard the second story has been pushed, a fairly significant amount. And it is that room and the room immediately adjacent to it which create the view blockage. It's not the playroom off on the far side, as the point was made by Mr. Skelton at the Planning Commission hearing, that the outside wall of the house is sort of the big bedroom is what creates the blockage, and just moving the side room didn't do very much at all. Just in quick summary, I appreciate the efforts that the Planning Commission made to try and preserve our views. I think part of the problem was that the original application was so overwhelming, and the developer made concessions along the way every time there was a hearing and was told, no, that's not good enough. They scaled back. And so it seemed like there were compromises being made, but it was in relation to a project that shouldn't even been in front of the Planning Commission in the first instance. The question is, what's the balance between the development of this house and the impact on the neighboring houses? If this were CEQA that was involved, there are options available here to mitigate to an insignificant level any impact. Obviously, it's categorically exempt, so we're not there. But I'd submit that should be the same standard that you look at when you consider these issues. If there is a feasible way for the applicant to avoid impacting the views of a neighbor, the valuable views of a neighbor, the important views of a neighbor, shouldn't they be required to do that? There are ways to do that here, either by cutting back the size of the house slightly. They could reduce the 100 square foot walk-in closet in the master bedroom and thereby pull the house back 5 feet, the second story back 5 feet. They have more room to build on the first floor. You folks recently amended the town's ordinances to allow a greater lot coverage ratio to avoid these very kinds of conflicts. There's about another 400 square feet that could be built on the first floor that would not exceed the floor area, the lot coverage ratio requirements, and would get the developer the size house that apparently is required. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll hold questions until we hear now from the appellant, the applicant. And the applicant will also be allowed 10 minutes.
Okay. Good evening, council members. My name is Chris Skelton, and it's my pleasure to be presenting on behalf of the applicant for 8 Westward Drive. Doug, thank you very much. Staff has been a pleasure to work with throughout this process, and I'll do my best not to step on staff's toes since we've been known to mimic presentation styles in the past. I'm going to run you through a little bit of the history and then open it up to questions. This is the first rendering, although it's not the first design. There were many design iterations before this. And here you can see what the final approved home design looked like after the February hearing, which was unanimously approved by the Planning Commission. Bit of project background. There have been numerous iterations of the design. We looked at alternative site strategies, which I'll touch on in a moment. Did extensive neighborhood research and outreach with our architect and other members of the team. Met with adjacent neighbors and worked to revise the design to address concerns that were brought up. There are numerous neighbor support letters, both in the packet and that have been published on social media after we learned that this issue was taking root on Nextdoor. We did not put those social media posts in the packet this evening, but they're out there. We worked with staff in redesigning and going through really a planning process. This application was first submitted back in April of 2017. At that point in time, staff said incomplete for really technical procedural issues. After working through those, there was a informal incompleteness comment period from staff saying, I don't believe that we can make the findings based on what has been submitted, although it was technically complete within the meaning of the municipal code. There was a design revision from that point in time And I think perhaps some of the confusion and the story polls from early on in the process stem from that sort of first go around with staff. And throughout the process, the owner and the design team have wrestled with all of the same issues that any person wanting to improve their property, bat around, which are views, privacy, massing, and trying to accomplish your sort of dream home, meeting the standards and the needs of a growing family. At the end of the day, through the design review process, staff recommended approval, and the Planning Commission unanimously approved the project. We've already seen a slide like this before, pattern of development in the neighborhood. You can see most of the homes are focused predominantly close to the street along Westward. And the orientation of the homes is quite interesting. Most of them actually are oriented to the street. This is the pattern of development that's based in 1963 when the subdivision was first approved and built out. There are a few homes on the other side of the street that are oriented or have improvements through windows or other architectural features that do take advantage of the views. You will see on the western side of the street, most of those homes are not oriented to take advantage of the views. Although, obviously, through 4 design review hearings, we have done everything we can to work with the neighbor in addressing the view concerns and revising the application. So I said that we went through a couple different massing studies and site strategies. One was to shift the house further to the south and elongate it. That obviously created some significant issues. The other was to shift it closer to the street frontage. There is a little bit of a berm as you go up to the property, and most of the homes are terraced and sort of notched into the hillside throughout the community. We thought bringing it actually closer to the street, building up on the existing footprint, would artificially exacerbate the perceived height, bulk, and mass. So what we've done is we've tried to pivot off of the existing footprint. So this is the south elevation from the September hearing, and the reason why I show this is that it actually identifies the substantial design iteration that was accomplished by working with staff in July and August, which was shifting the house to the east by 4 feet to mitigate and minimize the rear yard view concerns from the upslope neighbor, the appellant. Also, elimination of a master bedroom deck, and then you'll also see the dashed outline, and I apologize, this pointer doesn't register on the TVs, but the dashed outline of how the bulk and mass was actually, or the height of the home was reduced by about 2.5 feet. This also, the south elevation, one other point of interest is somewhat naked because it was out of respect for the neighbor and trying to preserve the privacy and that he enjoys by not putting a lot of windows on that southern elevation. This is the upper floor from September 2017. And again, to provide context, the September hearing, I think, was a pivotal hearing for the applicant because that's where the Planning Commission, or a majority of the Planning Commission, said it's not about a number, okay? It's not an overall floor area number. If it could be 4,700 square feet, one of the commissioners said, he wouldn't care. Floor area is a metric for evaluating bulk and mass, okay? But you can have a small house that reads quite large and ominous, and you can have a large house that reads much smaller and doesn't actually reflect the overall floor area. The September hearing is where we heard that feedback from the commission where they said, it's not about a number, it's about how it reads. It's the feel, it's the bulk and mass. And they said you have too much floor area on the second floor. And to point that out, I've given you a couple of measurements here. 48 feet on the southern elevation from west to east. 38 feet on the northern elevation, again, from top to bottom, west to east. And the overall linear footage on the western, or pardon me, the eastern elevation, the street elevation is 67 feet. All right. This, and I apologize, I didn't do the bold outline like Doug, but this is the final approved upper floor bulk and mass. You'll see that it is far far less significant. About a 20% reduction around the board, 40 linear feet there, 25 linear feet there, 52 linear feet there. I want to run through a couple of photos to touch on Mr. Sherwood's point about the views and his second element. All right, so we struggled with views and how do you evaluate them? These 6 photos were taken in consultation with Mr. Sherwood. Doug was present, and the part of the reason for showing these is to show how a view can be significantly altered if you are 1 foot to the right, 1 foot to the left, 2 feet back, 2 feet forward. Okay, and you'll see. Really, the white story pole next to the chimney is a good marker, and that's what ultimately the Planning Commission used in giving us guidance towards a path of approvability. But you'll see how that marker shifts depending on where you're standing on that deck. Pinning down exactly where a view corridor or a view angle is very difficult. It's especially difficult here because of the use of that space. It's an artificially raised deck that actually the focus is closer back to the house. There's a fire pit, the chairs orient back to the house, there's a fence, a solid wood fence, and so how is the view exercised or enjoyed was a difficult exercise. And that's part of the purpose of the December photos was to understand how is that view enjoyed and how do we design around that view. Ultimately, what we were told, and I'm sorry, that should be January 23rd, was the Planning Commission unanimously said, if you pivot off of that white pole, which marks the edge of the chimney, we can make the findings that it is not a significant and adverse view impact. So we went back out with Mr. Sherwood, and I had Mr. Sherwood take the photos, set up the tripod. Is this okay? Does this look right? And we left the northwest story pole in place for future reference, but that is no longer accurate in displaying the bulk and mass of the structure. The bulk and mass has been recessed back to where the contractor is standing, and you had to zoom in to show the 2x4 because it was literally hidden behind the white pole, which is lined up with the edge of the chimney. From that point, we found essentially the pivot point. And pardon me, this is the pivot point where the contractor was standing. We lined it up with the next pole up, which forms a line, basically a hypotenuse triangle. And from there, the architect redesigned by shifting it in and out to stay on that view angle.
Mr. Skelton, that was
10 minutes?
10 minutes.
Can I eat 1 minute into our 5-minute rebuttal time? Just to wrap it up?
It would then, we would have to extend the same thing to Mr. Sherwood. But you will be able to have your rebuttal and just,
Yep.
you just talk really fast.
For purposes of flow, can we have a less time on rebuttal and just to finish it out? Or if you prefer, we can finish the presentation.
Yeah, no, we'll keep it as it is.
Okay.
But now
Certainly.
is the time for the council to have questions of the applicant or the appellant. Any questions? Any questions? No? Jim, any questions? Okay, no questions of either. And so then we will open it up to public comment. Anybody from the public that would like to speak to this issue can come up and you'll have 3 minutes. Anybody from the public? Okay. And if you'll please state your name and your address.
You need to spell my name for the record, because you're going to need to
Sure.
spell it. Yeah, so, all right. First name Steve, last name is T-S-U, whoever's writing it down, C-H-I-Y-A-M-A. So my wife and I live on the corner of Westward and Balclutha. So just a quick comment on the social media. Next door is the worst. The last 2 days, just the commentary that I've seen, but I don't see anybody of all the people that did comment. I don't see them here. Not that I would know, but there were more than the number of people here commenting on social media, even though they don't happen to live in the neighborhood. I live across the street on a corner, actually on the corner of Balclutha and Westward. So we can see the house. Obviously, our views are not impacted. We moved in a couple years ago. We're going through a remodel now where Doug and his team were involved. And it was painful for us too. But it was a thorough process, and we believe it was fair. And in the end, during our process, our neighbors objected as well to different components of it. But we were able to work it out with them, and we're in the process now of going through our remodel. As far as the applicants, we've met them, and they are members of the community, although some people on social media don't think that. And we believe that their intention, whether or not they choose to live in the home that they are remodeling, will still be a fine addition to the neighborhood. And again, I can't speak to Mr. Sherwood's views because we don't live there. But as far as the neighborhood is concerned, as far as we're concerned, some of the neighbors that we have spoken with, we're in support of the project as it stands. And that's the first I've seen of the revised plans. So we definitely support those revised plans more so than the original plans, which were a little bit too bulky. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Okay, then seeing none, we will close it to public comment. And now you'll have 5 minutes for rebuttal. First, the applicant. Okay, and you'll have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mayor and council members. I'll try and wrap up my presentation here quickly. Basically, I wanted to explain the design thought process between January and February's approval. Again, identifying the pivot point and then redesigning around that. These are the same photos. Now, I labeled this detrimental reliance because even though we tried to solicit that pivot point, or what was the marking from the commission in December, we couldn't quite find out exactly an objective standard for evaluating views, which again are subjective and difficult to ascertain. But one thing that did come from the January hearing was after the commission said this is where we think the line should be, Mr. Sherwood said, with that line, I'm fine. And so we went through an exercise of going back out to Mr. Sherwood's house, hiring the contractor, going through the story polls, going through a redesign iteration, coming back to the hearing in February only to find on the dais a letter of objection and ultimately this appeal, which is unfortunate because we have worked and tried to work with Mr. Sherwood for the past few months. Finding 3, that the project will not adversely or significantly and adversely affect views, sunlight, or privacy of any nearby residents. I think that we've touched and belabored that point enough. The staff report has consistently identified that the view is utilized and perceived from a artificially raised deck. There's a solid wood fence in between the properties. It's partially obstructed by both near and distant trees. It's partially obstructed by utility lines. So there are a lot of things that go into a view, and ultimately the Planning Commission decided that the view was not significantly and adversely impacted as a result of the design. I'm going to turn the remaining time over to the owner, if I may. Thank you.
Good evening, council members. My name is Mo Razayan, and I'm the managing member of the LLC that owns 8 Westward. I apologize in advance for reading the statement, but I'm not very comfortable in public speaking forums. I started the application process almost a year ago, so I've had a lot of time to think about my new home becoming reality. Unfortunately, the process has become anything but a dream. Like many who moved to Marin from other parts of the Bay Area, we were attracted by the access to the outdoors, sense of community, and quite frankly, the outstanding schools. driving force that chose for me to move to Corte Madera was the lifestyle and the education for my kids. Early on in the planning process, Mr. Sherwood stated, "Why don't you people find another neighborhood to build in?" I took offense to that. I'm Middle Eastern, my wife is partially black. My family is important to me, personally and culturally. I do not want to believe that there were any racial issues at play here, but it's hard not to question the motivation of his appeal based on the statements that, like this, would, with the efforts we have gone through to accommodate Mr. Sherwood. Through this process, my wife has questioned whether it's healthy for our family to move next door to Mr. Sherwood. We have had many discussions following the Planning Commission's meeting where we were reevaluate the situation. Thankfully, there are many other neighbors who have supported the move. Just like one home doesn't define a community, one person shouldn't and should not influence somebody to build their dream home. Mr. Sherwood has refused to identify the LLC or myself by name. I expect he wants to depersonalize my application by constantly referring to me as a developer, which is absolutely false. I work in real estate, although I'm not sure what my profession has to do with approvability of my home design. I have 2 kids. My family, here too, my family dynamics should not factor into approvability of a design review application. We were more excited to join the community before the passive-aggressive adversarial process with Mr. Sherwood developed over the past few months. I've tried to work with Mr. Sherwood, as many other neighbors, to express any interest in the design review process. In September, the view of the bay from Mr. Sherwood's raised deck in the rear corner of his yard has been the issue. I worked diligently through 3 public hearings since September to resolve those perceived view impacts to everyone's satisfaction.
Is that it, Rebecca? Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, and now we have, let's see, we are now at the rebuttal
Appellant.
by the appellant. We're already at 7B. And you will also have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. Let me just say that I am beyond offended by this gentleman's statements. My comments had nothing to do with his family. I met his wife. We had a nice conversation very early on in the process. We chatted about their children. Their children were with them. My comment was, you don't come into a neighborhood and overbuild as a neighbor. That if you want to build a house of this size, you should find a more appropriate location to build the house. Not that he couldn't move into the neighborhood or that I was somehow bothered by his ethnicity. My future daughter-in-law is Indian, and it's absurd. I will also say that numerous statements have been made through the process about how they have tried to work with us. I have not met this gentleman before. He's never been, to the best of my knowledge, anywhere at any meetings at the property that I've been at. My meetings have been limited to the project supervisor Tyler, the builder Hannibal, and Mr. and counselor. At no time have they solicited my input. At no time have they asked me what would it take to compromise or to reach an acceptable design. It has always, always, always been, here is our design. We hope you like it because this is what we're going to go forward with. I cannot say strongly enough how this differs from the experience that Steve apparently had where he worked with his neighbors to come up with a compromise. There's been no working with me. And I've been, early on when I met Mr. Bush for the first time, he mentioned that one of the approaches that could be taken was an informal sit-down early on with the applicant to try and work out design issues. And I said I would be happy to participate in that I did not want confrontation, that I was the kind of guy that made compromises, as evidenced by the stupid statement that I made after the hearing was held, the last Planning Commission meeting that I attended. And the applicant never took that up. The pictures that I showed you before of the blockage of the view, that was the initial application. That's from the staff report of the initial proposal that was presented. It's not some watered-down version. There may have been something where they moved a wall or a garage or who knows what, but it's been kind of the Winchester Mystery House all along. I will loop back to asking I will also say I don't believe staff ever recommended approval of this project. I believe staff has been revenue neutral the whole time and has said, as they told you tonight, what your options are. But they have not done everything they could do to mitigate the view impacts. They simply haven't. They've done everything they can to preserve a house of the scale that they want to. And they bought this house with the intention, apparently, of developing it. They knew the site constraints, and frankly, they're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. It's just when it's funny. They love the schools. When I talked to his wife at the hearing, she was of the impression that the schools that they loved were the Larkspur Corte Madera School District across the Cove School across the way, despite the fact that we're in the Reed School District. So it's and I explained to her the inter-district transfer process, which I wouldn't have done if I was a racist, which is just offensive beyond belief. And I have nothing further with these people.
Thank you very much.
I do have one other thing, and that's just I want to thank the Planning Commission for their efforts and staff for their efforts.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Sherwood. Okay, now it's time for final questions of the applicant or appellant, or both, from the council. Bob, anything? Jim, anything? No? Okay. And then final council questions of staff. Nope.
Well,
Okay, Jim?
it's not directly, the Tushiyama residence that's going through approval, how much larger will it be? According to the assessor records, the total square foot of that lot is living 2,055 square feet, garage 420, a deck of 20, for a total of 2,499. How much larger would it be once it's redone? Is that okay?
Can you please step
Yeah,
up to the
no,
microphone?
We're not reopening
Thanks.
the public.
Okay.
So,
All right.
okay.
All right.
Okey doke. Then, if there are no questions of staff,
I'll just reiterate, from staff's perspective, we actually don't have that information right in front of us at the moment.
Okay.
okay, thanks, Adam. Okay, we will close this public portion of the hearing, and it's time for council discussion, deliberations, findings, and motions. And I'd like to start this, and that is that I know we've done it before, but I really personally urge the Planning Commission, or the Planning Department, to allow the Planning Commission to come up with design guidelines. I got my husband to get on the rafters tonight and take down all these boxes with the hopes that I could find the design guidelines that were in force when I was in the Planning Commission. We went through everything and had no luck. You should see the stuff we did find. But anyway, there had, which really addresses this particular case, is there had been design guidelines developed where what was the primary view, and this was directed at water views and Mount Tam views. Where was the primary view? What was the primary view? What was the secondary view? As I recall, the primary view was the living room, dining room, master bedroom. if I recall that correctly. And then there were secondary views, and those usually were from the outside or from the patio. And then the third views went down to the small bedrooms. What was real interesting is that they'd come up with, or we had come up with a percentage that if somebody had a view corridor by a certain percentage, like 10% or 15%, could be taken, but it was put on record that if somebody came back for a remodel, that was always referred to, so you weren't getting creep, that all of a sudden people kept adding on and modifying designs, so all of a sudden a neighbor that had a view had no view. And so I really urge the planning department to really facilitate the planning commissioners from coming up with design guidelines. It doesn't, with no reference to you, Teresa, it doesn't need to go through all the musters of law, but just simple, basic design guidelines so that we don't keep getting appeals. And I think it can be accomplished pretty easily, but it's just got to be adopted. And I just urge that we do this ASAP, and I know that I'm a broken record when it comes to this, but I mean, we have another appeal, and I think that it could have been averted if we had those really very plainly defined guidelines that were very reasonable. And once we had those guidelines in place, way back when, we never got one appeal until there was a change in planning directors, and those were all discarded. And so I think you'll find your job in the planning department, staff, way much easier, and that we won't have to get all this conflict that comes with the appeals. And you know, the goal was that all the neighbors end up on good terms with even a better project than they had set out to have. Okay, I will now step off my soapbox and council discussions, deliberations, findings, and a motion. Would anybody like to start?
I can.
Thank you, Diane.
Sure. I'm going to start by making a comment that I've stated in other instances where we've had appeals, especially regarding views, notwithstanding your excellent recommendation that maybe we go to a more objective kind of guideline. But that is that our neighborhoods are suburban in character. We are not rural. We live near neighbors. We see homes right out our windows when we're looking. We shouldn't have an expectation that we will never be impacted at all by our neighbors. But I think some people, you know, read our ordinances and our policies that in such a way that they are led to believe that they have a right to no impact. But that's not really what our design guidelines say. So I'm looking at what the Planning Commission said about the, especially the view impacts on 10 Westward. First of all, and I'm looking at page 4 of the Planning Commission resolution, second paragraph. Views from 10 westward are primarily limited to the patio area in the rear yard, with some limited views from the upper floor, including the small bathroom window, and windows in the upper living room area facing north-northeast. And then it goes on to say, the widest views of the marsh can be seen from the patio in the rear yard looking north-northeast. These views can be seen when standing on the patio, but not when seated, and cannot be readily seen from elsewhere in the rear yard. First sentence of the next paragraph, the view from the patio is only visible if a number of specific conditions are met. And in parentheses, it says, viewer located on the raised patio or deck must be standing. The view would only be partially blocked, and the views from the living room windows would be largely unaffected. So I would not say that there would be zero impact to the views from 10 westward, especially standing on that raised deck on the back patio. However, I cannot find that they would be significant impacts, nor do I think that that it is an impact in any other way on that house in any significant way. The bulk of the home's footprint will be on the first floor, which, due to the topography, is going to be much lower than the property at 10 westward. And it's going to be sited mostly on the south, so it appears to have limited impact on, 2 westward, I believe. So I welcome I look forward to hearing what my fellow council members have to say about this, but I think the Planning Commission was right on that the view impact is neither significant nor adverse, and I would lean towards denying the appeal.
Okay, thank you. And next,
Sure.
Bob, thank you.
Thank you. Couple of things. First up, Diane, I would largely agree with your comments. Planning Commission appeals, I think, are the toughest thing that we do as a council, and it seems like it keeps coming back to the view. So the first thing I would like to do is, again, echo Mayor Condon's comments, and I would specifically suggest we also research ordinances from Belvedere and Sausalito and Tiburon, who have dealt with this view issue for years and are much further along on the learning curve on this, because I think this is the third time that we've been dealing with this. Clearly, there is a lack of clarity, I think, in our ordinance here, or we wouldn't keep having appeals on this issue. So I think we need to do a better job of defining what we need so that we give the Planning Commission and also the public the tools that they need to make a proper evaluation on how this should work. The view itself, I would agree. Is there an impact on the view? Yes. But it's not a primary view. The design on the house, I think, is very, very thoughtful. It's a very attractive house, but it has been done in such a way and stepped down the hill so that it is clearly taking into account what's going on at 10 Westward as well, so that it's not really impacting that view. There is an impact from that patio if you stand on that patio in the back, no question about it. But again, it is a small part of the property, and the primary orientation of 10 Westward is such that, from what I could see, the overall impact is not going to be that large. So bottom line, and I think that's really the primary issue here that we're talking about, is the view. I think everything else is just not as relevant. I think that's really what this particular topic comes down to, which I think it's so important, again, that we try to hammer out a clear review ordinance for everybody's benefit. But bottom line, I can make the findings on this too, and then would therefore reject the appellant's appeal.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Jim?
To me, the issue is slightly different. I think it's just too much house for too small a lot. And if you look at the neighboring houses, the total usage to the square foot of the lot, the proposed new house is materially larger than all the neighbors. In fact, it'll be the next largest house is 4,185 square feet of house on a 14,595 lot, which is, that lot's much bigger than the proposed, the lot with the westward house. So I think if they cut back the size of the house to something like 3,400 square feet, that would be in keeping with the size of the neighboring houses relative to their lots. And so otherwise, the next house in the neighborhood that it goes on there, somebody will say, okay, we need 4,500 square feet. And we're going to have a gradual emission creep or a shift in the Overton window of what is an acceptable house, and we're all going to have a neighborhood of McMansions. And I'm not certain from a policy standpoint that's where we want the town to go. So if I were on the planning commission, I could not have made finding 4. So.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Just to make perfectly sure, Doug, there were no variances in this particular application?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I think that, and I may have made, I can't remember if I made the comment before council or at another meeting, but one of the things with this particular application is, granted, it's a relatively large home, but in the development of neighborhoods, this is what's happening everywhere. And as a result, it is improving the value of the homes. And so, granted, it is a big home, but there's nothing saying that a neighbor isn't going to build a big one too. And eventually, instead of it looking like a tract development, it's going to look like a development of custom homes. And so, being that there were no variances, had there been variances, then I can see Mr. Andrews' point, and I probably would have gone along with it. But being that there were no variances, I can't. I think it's that it was really vetted well before the Planning Commission and before our planning staff. And I appreciate all the work that's gone into it just by virtue of looking at the hundreds of pages that we have tonight. But I feel that although there is an impact on the Bayview, which I hold Bayviews very dearly, but it's not a primary view, and it is only a view from a very limited area, and yet it's still preserved. You still have the Bay View there. And so, anyway, I don't see any other alternative but to uphold the Planning Commission's decision to approve this application.
May I
Yes.
say something? I just wanted to address Jim's comments. As Carla said, homes in these neighborhoods are changing. They're undergoing renovations. Some are going larger, some are staying the same. But this is an improvement. It will be an attractive home. I think despite its size, the view from the street, the view from the neighboring properties, appears to be in scale with the other homes in the neighborhood. I think the siding of it and the articulated roof lines at the various corners and the elevation makes it it tends to minimize the height and bulk as viewed from the adjacent properties and also from the front. But I also want to mention something about the way families live these days. People are accustomed to larger houses. You know, they don't live in tiny homes like the one I grew up in. Oftentimes, there's at least one working parent, sometimes two working parents, each with their own office. People are using their homes differently these days, and there's an expectation for more square footage by a lot of people. That being said, we have a town that has a lot of different kinds of homes. So one large property in a neighborhood of mostly two-story homes that are actually, you know, pretty decent in size does not change the character of our town or, in fact, even that neighborhood. We have lots of different types of homes and sizes of homes to suit different needs. So, I also wanted to mention that I hope the neighbors can figure out a way to get past this and get along. It's unfortunate that there was not better communication early on to kind of take care of some of these issues before it reached this point. So I hope that, and this is something that this council has said to pretty much every applicant and appellant that has come before us, we really hope that you can put aside your differences and figure out a way to be neighbors, because that really is what our community is about. That's why you love your neighborhood. That's why your new neighbors want to move in, because we are a great community. So hopefully you guys can come to be friends. So with that, I will move to, let me see, what does the motion need to be?
11.
Move to deny the appeal and uphold the Planning Commission's action by approving the resolution number 11/2018.
I'll second that.
Councilmember Andrews.
No.
Councilmember Bailey. Councilmember Ravazio.
Yes.
Vice Mayor First.
Yes.
Mayor Condon.
Yes. Okay, the motion carries, and I would like just to repeat what Diane said, that I hope that the neighbors can all have good relationship, and for the new neighbor on the corner of Balclutha and Western, great job that you're doing in front. Boy, you got rid of the junipers. So thank you for that. Okay, and then,
Thank you.
thank you. And then we'll move on to,
To turn about 500 pages.
right. Yeah.
It gets easier.
To the, wait a minute, oh, I skipped something. Okay, wait a minute, here we go. This is from Rebecca, and this is consider adopting resolution of the town council. Did I skip? Oh, wait a minute, here we go, okay. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay. This is to consider the amendment and reintroduction of ordinance 975 to be approved by the voters at the June 5th, 2018 election, to repeal the existing special property tax currently imposed for storm drainage and flood control infrastructure, and then at the same time to increase and extend until repealed by the voters the general transactions and use tax from a half-cent tax to a three-quarter-cent tax, and require annual audit and citizen oversight of tax expenditures.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Members of the council, say that quickly 3 times. Real quickly, the town council at its February 20th, 2018 meeting voted unanimously to introduce an ordinance that, if approved by the voters at the June 5th, 2018 election, would continue the half-cent sales tax measure at a three-quarter-cent rate and repeal the existing storm drainage property tax of $98 per residential unit or per 1,000 commercial square feet. And again, that is referenced in attachment 2 of the staff report. Following the February 20 town council meeting, staff was advised by the town attorney to make some minor updates to the draft ordinance to maintain the compliance of the model ordinance of the California Department of Taxes and Fee Administration, or the CDTFA, formerly known as the State Board of Equalization. The deadline to submit the ballot measure change for the placement on the June 5th, 2018 ballot is actually this Friday, March 9th. So at this time, the town council is therefore asked to consider amending and reintroducing the ordinance in front of you, number 975. The town attorney is here if you have any questions with those changes, but again, as I understand them, they're minor in nature. And then secondly, if that is approved by the council, the next business item, 6.1.2 of the agenda, will call for a special election to be held on June 5th, set the question to be placed on the ballot, as well as request the services in consolidation with the Marin County Elections Department, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions? Any questions from the public? Yes, Mr. Kuhnhart.
Madam Mayor and members of the council, just a few questions for clarification to help with the public communication on this issue, which no doubt will be a major feature of the next couple of months. In the write-up of the actual change, there are a number of paragraphs which accept certain kinds of automobile purchases from the tax. Basically, as I read it, but I'm not an attorney, and I would love to know what the meaning of all those exceptions really is. It seems to me that anybody who is coming to Corte Madera to buy a vehicle for commercial use that's outside of the town, or for individual use who can prove that their residence is outside the town, would not pay the town sales tax extra on their vehicle. And I'd be very interested to know whether or not that's the case. If you are calculating, for your information, if you're calculating what the extra quarter-cent is for a Corte Madera resident to buy a car in Corte Madera, for a $25,000 to $30,000 car, it's $65 to $75, period. It's not a big deal, certainly, even compared to the $98. Question number 2. When does the $98 special tax expire, or doesn't it? Is that just?
2020.
It does.
Is that right?
It would.
2020?
2023 is when it's set to expire.
2023.
23?
Yeah, the sales tax would expire in 2020,
Oh,
but the
excuse me.
special tax would be 2023. So,
The flood tax.
so we're early retiring by 5 years or so, what that one. That's very helpful. I also wanted to make sure that you understand that there's a little bit of an inconsistency one page to the other. 5th page of the write-up, it says the difference in annual revenue is about, at a half cent, is about 2.5 million, and at a 3/4 cent, 3.7 million. On the 2nd page, it says 3.5 million. I think it ought to be stated as pessimistically, if you will, for the taxpayer, or optimistically, if you will, for the town as possible, at about 3.7 to 3.75 million as the extra anticipation of revenues from the quarter-cent raise. And there was one more. Oh, yes. In the recitation of all of the wonderful capital improvements that are needed, that are daunting capital improvements that are needed in the next 5, 10, and 20 years, I noticed that there's nothing about hillside roadway replacements and repairs and reinforcements. And I'm afraid to say that we are going to have to come to terms with some of the steeper hillside roads falling apart, and those are just not on the list right now of capital expenditure items that are broadcast here. Those are all the comments and questions that I have, and good luck.
Thank you. I have a question following a point that Mr. Kuhnhart made. Usually the sales tax, as I understand it, goes to where the car is registered. But with when we're raising this, what percent or how much does the town get from it?
So I'm not comfortable completely answering that. We're going to have to do a little bit of research, but how I understand it, this sales tax measure does, it does apply to all sales within our jurisdiction, and we get a greater percentage than the normal 1%
Okay.
on a sale. So, but I want to research that mechanism, and we can certainly report that out. It's a great question. I think we need to clarify it.
Okay.
The 3.5 to 3.7 number, it should be 3.7, so we'll state that consistently. Go ahead.
So these provisions didn't change materially from the last version, but I agree that I think I would feel more comfortable, the town manager would feel more comfortable if we report back to you exactly how this works for auto sales.
Okay, thank you. Okay, questions? No questions? Okay, any other questions from the public? You want another point?
You are so kind, Madam Mayor. There is reference made to over 32% of the town's homes are within the 100-year flood zone. I was wondering if anybody can give the answer as to how many, what percentage of the town's homes are within 2 feet, 3 feet, 4 feet of the current mean high tide, because those are the projected increases by 2050, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, so it's a great question. I think what's going to be happening, and it's really separate from the sales tax measure conversation, but it's important to that very question, is the current infrastructure and state of our town, and it really goes to our flood control and drainage program and the state of our program. And so in March and April, again, we're going to begin pretty quickly, probably closer to the end of March or beginning of April, the community forums on our current system and the state of the households and the percentages on different scenarios to really educate our community of the current status. And so it's a great question, and that'll be coming separate from this sales tax measure conversation, because it's key to our infrastructure, and it's a big deal.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Anybody else have questions? Okay, I'm going to close it to the public. And we have an option to reintroduce ordinance number 975 as amended, provide direction to staff regarding requested changes to the attached draft ordinance, and reintroduce the ordinance, or take no action and elect not to submit the measure for inclusion on the June 5th ballot. And is there any discussion there?
I will move to reintroduce ordinance 975 as amended.
Second?
Well, however, do we want to allow for any minor edits as discussed tonight? There was comment about 3.5 million versus 3.7. I don't see where that is in the actual ordinance, and I wonder if that was maybe strictly in the staff report.
I believe it was in the staff report.
Okay, so.
There's no amendment needed
No
for that.
amendment needed. Okay, so, never mind, just 975 is amended.
Thank
I'll
you.
still second it.
Thank you.
It's been seconded.
Councilmember Andrews.
Yes.
Councilmember Bailey. Councilmember Ravazio.
Yes.
Vice Mayor First.
Yes.
Mayor Condon.
Yes. Okay, that is passed, and then we will go on. And this is considering introducing the ordinance to be approved by the voters at the June 5th election that extends the town's current sales tax formerly Measure B, at either its current half-cent level or at an increased three-quarter-cent level, and that repeals the town's existing flood control special property tax, formerly Measure C, to the extent the sales tax is extended at the three-quarter-cent level. Okay. Todd, do you want to report on that, or?
Are you on 6.1?
I'm on 5.1.
That was the go one more.
Okay, so you don't need that one?
There you go, even a longer
There we
one.
go. Oh, my gosh, and I'm going to say, okay, wait till you hear this, okay?
Wait.
This next one, you would have wished it were the last one. The last is to consider adoption of Resolution 08/2018 of the Town Council of the Town of Corte Madera, A, calling and giving notice of the holding of a special election on June 5th, 2018, to consider adoption of a measure to, 1, repeal the special drainage property tax, $98 per residential unit or per 1,000 commercial square feet. Number 2, extend the existing general half-cent sales tax, the transaction and use tax, at a three-quarter-cent rate until ended by voters. And number 3, require an annual audit of and a citizens advisory committee to oversee the transaction and use tax expenditures. B, requesting consolidation of the special election with the June 5th, 2018 statewide primary election. C, there had to have been a shorter way of saying all this. C, directing the town attorney to prepare an impartial analysis of the measure pursuant to Elections Code Section 9280. And D, authorizing 2 council members to draft, sign, and submit a ballot argument in favor of the measure and any rebuttal argument, and to select community members to sign these arguments.
Good job.
I need a drink of water.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I'll start off. So again, the town council at its January 16, February 6, February 20, 2018 meetings received reports regarding funding and provided by a half-cent sales tax measure that was approved by the voters in November 2013. The council also heard presentations from staff and held discussions regarding the identification and planning for future infrastructure needs and priorities. The last item covered the steps from the February 20th, 2018 meeting. And following that discussion, the town council directed staff to come back and prepare a resolution for consideration at this meeting for council calling for an election, placing the extension of the sales tax measure on the ballot, and requesting the Marin County Department of Elections to consolidate a special election with the June 5th, 2018 statewide primary election. It is proposed that the sales tax measure would continue until repealed by the voters and would require the continuation of a citizens oversight committee review of no more than 5 residents of the town to be appointed by the council, along with examination audit to ensure funds are spent locally as promised for the benefit of Corte Madera residents. Again, the deadline to submit the ballot measure in time for placement of the June 5th, 2018 ballot is this Friday, March 9th. We're basically asking for three considerations for action tonight. And the first is to designate 2 council members authorized to draft and sign the argument in favor of the ballot measure and any subsequent rebuttals to the primary argument. 2, adopt the resolution that's attached, number 8-2018, as amended, to include the names of the designated council members. And 3, direct the town attorney to draft an impartial analysis of the ballot measure. If you refer to page 7 in 75 words or less. That is the ballot language before you for review. And it states the following. Shall Corte Madera, 1, repeal the special drainage property tax, $98 per residential unit, or 1,000 commercial square feet, and 2, extend the existing half-cent sales tax at a 3/4 cent rate until ended by the voters, providing, and this is where Mr. Kuhnhart stated correctly, providing 3.5 million annually. We may want to discuss if it's 3.5 or 3.7 annually for unrestricted general revenue purposes, and we give examples. For example, flood, sea level rise, disaster preparedness, fire prevention, repairing streets, reducing transportation congestion, safety improvements, 911 response, and senior and youth programs. This is subject to an annual audits and a citizens oversight committee. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions. I think in our staff report analysis, again, we analyzed this of just basically what we've currently brought in over the last 3 years, doing an analysis of sales tax revenues. And then we added the 1/4 cent. And with that, we came up with a $3.7 million number. As we continue into this next fiscal year, there's been some conversation to be more conservative, and the range is 3.5 to 3.7. And so I think that's what you have, the difference between the staff report and the ballot language, and just talking out loud to myself, I guess, in my own little world. I think we should leave it at 3.5, be conservative with the ballot language, and then we'll correct that in our staff report for the website. So it was a great point, and we'll correct that. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, I have a question. Wait, first of all, do you all have questions? I need to budge in first.
I just had one quick question. Does this max out the word count?
Oh, that's what I was going to ask.
Oh, sorry.
It does.
Thank you.
Okay.
So you would have to barter. You'd have to barter.
Because
I get
on this, you know, I just want to give everybody the benefit of the doubt on this. We need every vote. And I was thinking if we couldn't add 2 words, and that was, shall Corte Madera repeal the special drainage property tax, thus ending or terminating or anything, so that they understand that repeal means that it's calling an end to it, for anybody that might not understand.
We could substitute
repeal.
the word repeal with end. You could just substitute, you'd be at the same word count. Instead of using the word repeal, you could use the word end.
Okay.
Eliminate?
Yeah,
Eliminate.
eliminate is good. Eliminate.
Yeah, not terminate.
Terminate.
Eliminate.
That's too
Eliminate.
Republican.
Yeah, eliminate's good. Because I just think that, you know,
Sure.
somebody might look and just not remember high school history or whatever it is, and
And or eliminate, I think either of those works and is clear and accurate.
okay, any other comments?
Well, we've maxed out the 75 words, right?
Yeah.
No comment then.
Yeah, I think
I'm not sure whether they've decided.
Okay. Okay, so then, I think that will be helpful.
May I ask one thing?
Sure.
While I appreciate that this says reducing transportation congestion, really, I think what we are trying to do is improve our roadway operations, which is the best we can do at reducing congestion. So, and the reason I'm bringing this up is because we actually had this conversation at the Transportation Authority of Marin. It's difficult to reduce congestion. What you can do is make things work better, but it's not necessarily going to take cars off the road.
Right.
You just might get them moving a little bit more efficiently by improving street light timing maybe, or roadway improvements, or the way certain intersections operate. Do we want to have congestion in here? Because it's really incredibly difficult.
Do you want to say something instead of reducing transportation congestion, make it improve traffic flow?
Improve
Circulation.
traffic operations.
So you have one additional word in this wordsmithing, but what I will tell you at a lot of conversation with staff, people understand reducing congestion. They don't understand improving. I know what you're saying, you're correct technically, but it's a conversation of
Yeah, I'm a bit
how
of a
we get both with
transportation
an
authority
extra,
random
with an
at
extra
this
word.
point.
I would argue that if we invest in infrastructure that improves bicycle safety and bicycle accessibility, and continue to work with safe routes to school, and continue to increase the number of children who are riding bikes to school and walking to school through improving our sidewalks and making it safer, every one of those kids who's doing that is getting out of a car.
True.
The worst traffic times we have, as I was proven to again today when I was trying to get to a 3:30 meeting, are when school gets out in the afternoon and when it goes into session in the morning. So I think and we are taking some of this money and investing in those kinds of improvements, and I think that will reduce congestion.
How about improve traffic congestion?
Improve.
No?
No, that makes,
No?
that makes
mean
it sound
reduce
like traffic.
Ameliorate.
You're gonna make congestion more pleasant?
I don't know if we want to take, I don't know if we want to take transportation out maybe and replace it with a word, but that would be the only, I think people understand congestion.
I think they do too.
So you want to just leave it?
Well, I don't know. Maybe members of the public might
Let's hear what the
have
public has to
some
say.
Could
ideas.
relate to it.
Let me ponder while people speak.
He was specific on that line.
Okay, any other comments? Anything from the public? Thank you, Ms.
Some
Verbosi.
public opinion here. Karen Gerbosi, 111 Parkview Circle. I'm a proofreader in a former lifetime, so, and a copy editor, so I'm big on these kinds of things. I think that we want to make sure that they're words that make sense and that aren't fluffy and ambiguous. So that's kind of what I have to say about it. So if improving traffic flow is something that, even if you quantitatively improve it by some remote, tiny little percentage, you can say, yeah, we did that. But if you're going to do something like that, it needs to be something that's measurable. That's what improves something. So if it's not measurable, if it's not quantifiable, then I think that's a bad, I just think it's not the right words.
Okay. Wait, Karen?
Yep.
So what is your opinion on the, back here, the transportation, reducing transportation congestion?
Is that something that we can quantifiably measure, that if it happens, we'll know?
Well, like Bob
As
pointed
much as you
out,
can quantify improving traffic flow. I mean, it's
I
the
mean-
same concept, just expressed differently,
We'll
right?
know that, if we're paving more streets, that's something, we're putting more stoplights, we're doing specific things that are measurable, but those things about him are pretty, they're pretty fluffy. I don't like any of it, but I think we need to look at it like, how, I don't know how many voters we have, 5,417 or something. that in general, when voters read that it makes sense to them, that it resonates, and they go, yeah, I want that, and that 3 years hence, they'll be able to say, yeah, we got that.
Okay. Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Thank you.
And I think, Bob, your comment about saying if they're, if the kids have a safer route to school, that they're,
Well, like, for example, where the Prince Royal Crosswalk project is out to bid right now, which is going
Right.
to make it a lot safer for kids to walk to and from the Cove School. If kids feel safer walking to and from Cove School, they're not going to be in a car.
right.
That's going to reduce congestion. And I can give you a half dozen other examples of projects we got in the works that
Yeah.
will do the same thing.
Good. So then, I mean, this is
The problem with
an honest goal and an honest claim. It's-
Yeah, but thinking about it more, when folks talk about transportation congestion, they're just going to flash back to their most recent drive on 101 in the evenings and ignore all the work that we did in town. So
Yeah, we're not in charge of 101.
I know. I'm just saying that, it's sort of like, we'll put in a train because that's going to reduce congestion. We'll do the Novato Narrows because that will reduce congestion.
We're basically just, I think we're just trying to decide whether you want to express it in a positive manner or in a negative manner.
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking about the
Good.
same concept, right? Isn't it the same thing, or am I missing something?
Yes.
Well,
Yes, okay.
How we unpoop our
Yes, I'm
streets.
missing something, or yes, I'm.
Well, it's like,
Yes,
do
he
you
said.
say reducing transportation congestion or improve
The same point.
transportation
Improve traffic operations.
operations or circulation?
Yeah.
And it's all saying the same thing. It's just however
And I,
you want to put it.
and I also want to remind you guys that we have this project. I've lost track of the name of it even, but it's the one we're working on with Larkspur. And we got funded through the Active Transportation Program, which is going to improve operations on Warnham, Tamil Vista, Nellen, and even a little bit on Pfeiffer.
Yes.
And the concept, among other things, I mean, there's pathway improvements and sidewalk improvements, but in terms of roadways, it's opening up Nellen to southbound traffic off of Pfeiffer. So cars from Larkspur that want to get to the east side of the freeway, instead of having to come down Tamil Vista, they can go straight past Joann's. And you know where the little used car lot is, where there's a proposal to put an office building? They'd be able to turn right there and go down Nellen to the stoplight on Warnham. So they completely miss the whole backup on Tamil Vista. So that would be improving, presumably would improve traffic.
Right.
But it's definitely improving traffic operations. And all of the pathway type things, safety enhancements for pedestrians is improving traffic operations. But it does not leave us open for criticism that there wasn't some measurable reduction in actual congestion. So, but I'm mired in this stuff. Does traffic operations sound too wonky? But I think people know what it means.
I think congestion, don't you think congestion is something that?
Traffic flow
everybody just-
improvements,
It's a much more emotional,
traffic flow improvements,
Improve traffic flow.
improve
Yeah.
traffic flow.
And improve is positive as opposed to,
Okay.
what do you all think?
I think I'm not falling on a sword on this one,
What?
so. Whatever you're.
Jim says,
What what do you
Okay,
think?
Jim.
I like eliminating the special drainage tax and improve traffic flow.
Fine.
It's cleaner.
Okay, I'm fine with that.
Does that,
Okay, so
You good with that, Todd?
Yeah, that's great.
improve
Thank you.
traffic flow?
Improving.
okay.
Improving.
Oh,
Approving
wait a second.
annual-
Everything else is an
fire
inane,
prevention,
so,
Everything else
Quarry
is in the
streets,
You could put
same tent.
safety in there,
Karen
too.
Streets, improving traffic flow.
yeah.
okay. Well, not really. They're sort of shifting back and
And
forth.
safety. Yeah, it's kind of weird there.
We could just, yeah.
Improving roadway.
Not any traffic flow is
All right.
good.
I'd,
It's just there's
Comma,
no-
safety
I'd make it
improvements.
improve, not improving.
Yeah, because there's no.
Well, repairing
verb.
streets is an ing. We could have the previous one be street repair. Street repair
Yep.
and traffic flow improvements.
Okay.
Okay. We have
So we're at
improving
street
traffic
we're s-
flow?
No.
Street repair.
Street repair.
Improved traffic flow. How about that?
Improved, okay.
Okay. And then safety improvements, and we got improve.
May I clarify, are we saying improved traffic flow or traffic flow improvements? It's the same word count.
Yeah, I don't know.
Improved traffic flow, I think is what we said, right?
I think so. So I think this is how it should read. For example, comma, flood/sea level rise/disaster preparedness, comma, fire prevention, comma, street repair, comma, improved traffic flow, comma, safety improvements, comma, 911 response, comma, and senior/youth programs.
That's all preceded by not includes but not limited to, right?
For example.
Well, it says unrestricted general
For example, okay, great, yeah.
revenue purposes.
All right.
Okay?
Okay.
May I ask for one more clarification? I think we landed on eliminate, but I'm not sure whether we landed on eliminate or end to replace the word repeal.
I think eliminate. It's,
Eliminate.
Yeah.
yeah.
Now, do
So,
we need to specify, not in this, but anywhere, what the funds will not be used for?
No.
It can be used for any unrestricted general fund purposes, and then what's in the parenthetical are examples of what the council it has in mind.
Okay. Good enough.
so we need a
Okay.
couple of council members, right?
So, right, we need 2 council members.
Yeah, he's not here.
Do you want the mayor, vice mayor? Do you want to do it that way? Or do you,
I'm happy to do it,
okay, so,
and I'm not campaigning, so it's not
yeah,
an issue
so why don't we do
for
the,
me.
do the mayor, vice mayor.
You guys okay with that?
Works for
I'm
me.
fine with that.
Does
yeah.
that work?
Yep. You guys will do a great job.
Signing,
I thought you had to work on the rebuttal, too.
yeah.
Isn't that part of it?
You can't write the rebuttal until you get the argument from the other side.
So, okay, so we've got that, and then, we'll work on the argument in favor and the rebuttal, and, I don't know, Teresa, if you come up with stuff, or if we just do it.
Can we get a comment from?
Phyllis? Yeah.
You cannot write a rebuttal until the
No.
people who are against it write no.
No, no, no,
argument.
I-
So don't be planning on writing a rebuttal when you don't know what your rebuttal is.
No,
No, we're
no.
not.
just we have to determine who's going to do what. And then to direct the town attorney to draft an impartial analysis of the ballot measure. Yes, Rebecca.
Madam Mayor, if I may, the reason why these requests were placed in direction to council as requested actions are because, let's see, on page 3, section, oh, I can't find it right now. Yeah, page 3, section 6, and I guess 7 and 8, where it refers to rebuttals and the statements in favor. There are certain timelines that have to be adhered to have them submitted in a timely manner, and those don't happen to coincide with any of our council meetings, so there isn't time to bring this back for council for approval of the argument in favor or a rebuttal against any argument that happens to be submitted in opposition to the measure. So to grant the two council members and any members of the community the authority to draft and edit and submit those, we had to put it in the requested action because there wouldn't be time for council to consider that in the future in order to have a timely submittal.
Okay.
So it could be members from the community. It doesn't necessarily need to be council members.
One does have to be.
One does, but the other does not?
It's drafted to give you the authority to have the two selected council members, so the mayor and vice mayor would write the argument, submit it, and can decide on members of the public to sign. There can be no more than 5 signers.
Okay.
And the way this is drafted, there has to be at least one council member. So if you both are going to sign the ballot measure, you would then be selecting 3 members of the community to sign, up to 3 members of the community to sign with you. If only one of you is going to sign, you could select up to 4 members of the community.
Got it. Okay, excellent.
But there isn't time because of the way that the deadlines work this particular time around and your council schedule for you to bring the primary argument back to council for approval by the whole council. So the council would be delegating authority to the 2 of you to submit, essentially approve it between yourselves and move forward with it.
Great.
Okay.
Let me restate it. Could we delegate to Carla and Diane the authority to draft the letter and the subsequent rebuttal if necessary? And then also to select not more than 5 people to sign the document?
The matter is, there's a priority listed in the elections code that we have to follow. And so you get, since this is a council-sponsored measure, you've put it on the ballot, you get the first crack at it. And so if you want it to be a council argument, I would suggest that we have one council member sign it. You could have both of you sign it. But you would need to have one council member, but you can decide to have members of the community sign and support as well. If the council is choosing not to do that, then it would go to, there's a priority order, but in this case, it would essentially be sort of first come, first serve. And then the council would not have the ability to draft what that argument is. And so this will actually be in the elections pamphlet. It will be the pro argument in support of the measure. So the recommendation that we've put forth is to have at least one council member to sign this so that you essentially don't lose your option.
Okay, but I think the question is, I'm sorry.
I was going to just say delegate it
Is that what you
to Carla and Diane, whether they want to both sign it or ask other members of the council to sign it and then fill out the remaining 5 of the 5 slots with citizens who would be interested.
So your thought would be that other members of the council might want to sign on to it?
No. My thought is Carla and Diane can figure out who signs it, one of which would be a council person, okay? And since they're writing it, delegate to them the authority to pick the signers.
I think that's what this is proposed to do.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I thought you were suggesting something different, so I was searching for what was different. I apologize.
Okay.
Okay, but then on the rebuttal, we can pick other people from the town to sign on.
It doesn't have to be the same people, but it could be.
But it doesn't have to.
And it would be, the way this is drafted is you have, the two of you would have the authority to make those determinations
Okay,
together.
okay, so that we could, I'm just thinking to kind of spread the wealth there, that we can get the other community members in on this, the rebuttal, so that we're not on it, but we've got so many residents.
You're asking that question, and as you're asking it, there's a little question in my mind. So I believe it's the case. It does not need to be that, but what I can do is make sure that the elections code doesn't mandate that they're the same, and if they are, you would have to do it. If that isn't the case, and I believe it's not the case, then you can move forward with picking.
Okay.
So I can provide that advice actually to all the council members, so you know, if you like. I think it's the case that you can pick, but there's a little question mark in my mind. I'd like to just button that up before we.
Okay.
I gave you the wrong advice.
Great. Okay, thank you. Okay, so then, if that is all under control, then we can actually, then we've got the resolution, right?
I'd like to move resolution 8/218 as amended.
I'll second.
But, forgive me, will you, in addition to amending the wording on page 3, on page 4, are you also proposing to add the names of Carla and myself?
Yes. Or do we need a separate motion for that?
No,
No, it's all in that resolution.
it's on
Okay,
page
good.
4.
It's all,
All right, good.
Councilmember Andrews?
Yes?
Councilmember Bailey? Councilmember Ravazio?
Yes.
Vice Mayor First?
Yes.
Mayor Condon?
yes. Okay, whoa, the motion carries, thank you. Now we will move along.
Well,
What?
don't we also need to ask the town attorney to draft the language for the ballot handbook, is it?
It's drafted into the resolution. It's an impartial analysis, yes.
That's why it was,
That's why it was so
So
long. We were
challenging to
getting it all
read it.
in there for you.
okay. So anyway, we're starting new paragraph. With Adam Wolf. This is the calendar year 2017 Housing Element Annual Progress Report for the town of Corte Madera's fifth cycle housing element. Adam, good evening.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor Condon, council members. I prepared a brief staff report for the council that describes and attaches to it the 2017 Housing Element Annual Progress Report. It's fairly, in the attachment on tables, A describes the production, and just to mention, the purpose of this is to comply with Government Code Section 65-400, which requires that we review this at a public meeting. But basically just indicates our progress towards meeting our housing element goals and also our RENA housing production numbers. So Table A describes we've granted permits in 2017 for 4 new dwelling units, 2 of which were second units and 2 were new single-family homes on Chapman. And I think the other relevant table to look at is Table B, which describes our total progress. This is actually this is the 3rd year of our 8 year housing element cycle. These forms, by the way, will all be changing next year as HCD updates and as required by government code, by state legislation last year that was approved, adopted last year to update all their forms and provide direction to jurisdictions or cities and towns on how to report new required information for the next year. So you'll see they'll be much more robust in the coming years, and this is obviously as part of the HCD's mandate now to review progress towards each municipality's RENA requirements, and also then will impact sort of where the town falls under SB 35, streamlining rules and regulations. So this is required to be in, and very importantly this year, especially with the new legislation, required to be in by April 1st. So if you have any questions, please let me know now so I can do whatever we need to update it, but we'd obviously like to get it in as soon as possible.
Okay, well, I would just like to thank you for doing this, and for everybody here to be aware that what Adam did oftentimes enables the town to get grant funding for various things. And it's something that in the past, people have let it go by the boards, and it has disqualified us from receiving grant funding from the state. So thank you very much, Adam, for doing this.
It's a concern.
I'm looking at Table B.
Sure.
When it says year, is that calendar year or our fiscal year?
These are done by calendar year, so year 3 should say 2017. You could kind of place those above the year 3, but that's 2017.
Okay.
Any other questions to staff? Diane?
I can't find it in here right now, but I do know that there is a big push in the region, MTC and ABAG, for anti-displacement ordinances. And I recall we had something just generally in our housing element, I think it was. This is less a question than a comment. I would encourage the town of Corte Madera to pursue that. I know that many years ago when we were faced with the really high RENA that led to Wind Cup, there was discussion about, where to place those units, and there was a concern that if you rezone certain existing older, less dense apartment complexes for a higher density, you're likely to get a developer to come in, evict everybody, build luxury units with a handful of affordable, which essentially, would put a ton of pressure on middle-income folks to, try to find housing. I think it's really important that we save our older, more moderately priced housing stock. So I think it's important to pursue those kinds of policies sooner rather than later. That's all.
Thank you. Any other questions to staff? From our public, any questions? Nope, okay, I will close it to public comment and bring it back. And,
Move to accept the report?
right.
There's actually, we did prepare a resolution.
Oh, sorry.
That's fine. I should have mentioned that.
Move to approve Resolution 09/2018.
Second.
Receiving and accepting the annual report.
Okay, and Jim?
Second.
Councilmember Andrews?
Yes.
Councilmember Bailey? Councilmember Ravazio?
Yes.
Vice Mayor First?
Yes.
Mayor Condon?
Yes. Okay, and I'm just looking here. Rebecca, we don't have any, there it is. Okay, we will move on to 8.1, which is the draft of the upcoming agenda for March 20th. Has everybody had a chance to look that over? Anything that needs to be added?
Madam Mayor, members of the
Yes.
council, some of the things we're going to start focusing on presentations between now and the budget. And at your request, we're going to bring one department to council each meeting and just kind of introduce all the staff underneath the department head and give you a little story about each of them. And we'll do it one at a time leading up to the budget hearings at your request. So that's going to start pretty quickly as well.
Great. Okay, that'll be good.
Carla, I have
Yes.
one question. Are the people from the homelessness committee in the showers, is that going to be at the next meeting? or-
I'm trying to get them on the agenda, so it's
Okay.
dependent on them. So as soon as they're available, we will put them on.
Great, thank you.
Okay, and then what we'll do is, we will accept this, and then any other changes or recommendations, we'll give you all a call. Okay, and we don't have any minutes. So, if there are there any other questions, comments, or anything for tonight?
Town manager and council reports.
Oh, gosh, yes. And I have a whole list, too. Thank you. That's the new order. I'm not used to that. Okay, Diane, thank you. Will you start, please?
I have nothing to report.
Oh. Okay, Jim?
Me neither.
Oh, for gosh sakes. Bob?
Me three.
Well, wait a minute. I do, sorry.
Here.
All right, can I mention one thing?
Yes, you may.
I just once again want to thank our Public Works crew that I'm sure were out in full force during the storms, clearing brush and debris from our gutters and storm drains. Not an easy job, and I rest easier knowing they're out there keeping things flowing really nicely. So, sure.
But I missed the 5 a.m. emails from Kevin.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
With photos.
Todd, before we go on with council reports, I'm sorry to have skipped over. Do you have any
Just
reports?
too quickly, most importantly, our beloved George Warman is, it's been a moving target for us, but his last day will be this next Friday, the 16th. And then he's going to go on vacation until June 30th, take some vacation time, and then retire. He's asked that his retirement party be in June, so we're going to plan that now, and we'll be sending that out to the community and the council and everybody else, because a lot of people want to celebrate him. And what he's really enjoying between now and the 16th is people have individually been taking him out to lunch, and lunch is his favorite thing in the world to do. So if you have any open dates between now and then, he would probably really enjoy it. And then secondly, we're going to do coffee with the staff, kind of take the coffee with the cop mentality, and we're going to meet on Thursday from 8 to 11 at Cafe Verde with the community. And so we're going to start to try to do that monthly with various staff members. So I'm looking forward to that. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Just a few things. The State of the Town lunch is going to be March 29th, that the Chamber sponsors. We're going to have a new restaurant opening up in Town Center, Marin Pizza, and it's going to be right where the Elephant used to be, in that vicinity. And that should be opening in a couple of weeks. There is going to be a candidates forum that the Chamber sponsors every year, and a date has not yet been set, but the facilitator will be Dick Spotswood. And
You're getting heavy hitters.
I know. And on August 18th will be the chili cook-off. And I want to remind everybody again that on April 29th, from 2 to 4, is going to be the grand opening of the Age-Friendly Intergenerational Center. And that will be the celebration that everybody is invited to. There'll be refreshments and entertainment, and you can see hopefully what we're going to be working out of. We're doing everything on fast forward pace, but we'll get there. It's April 29th. It's a Sunday from 2 to 4. And so far, the programs that are going to be offered, drawing by a really renowned local artist and art teacher. Will be doing drawing, chair yoga, crafts. We'll have tech teens to teach adults how to use their iPhones and iPads and what have you. Storytelling for preschoolers, 3D printing, Age Song, which is like a discussion group, and they've already filled up 2 classes, and we haven't even started yet. And then also there will be a movie book club, which I think will be really interesting. There's so many movies out now based on books and vice versa. And so that will be also where you can see the movie and are encouraged to read the books so that there can be discussions afterwards. And there is going to be like a little card room area to play, do puzzles, cards, whatever. And then the teen hangout, we're going to borrow some space. It will come into its full operation in September after we're finished with summer park and rec activities. And that is really going to be, I think, something that will be really attractive to the teens. Also, we will be talking with the principal of Redwood to see if we can get that the kids, the teen techs, or tech teens, whatever you want to say, that they will get community service credit. And also, there'll be opportunities for peer tutoring. So it's really taking shape, and I just hope that we get the participation. So please, please get the word out, and we will do our best to do that too. So we start out with something really successful. And that is all I have to report. So if there is no further business, the meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.